Well, uh, I don't. Oh, there I am. I was looking for me. I want to start different. I don't know if any of you have ever noticed this up there behind me before. Can we see that? I'll call the meeting to order.
Wait a second. The Mississippi River just parted down the street here when you did that, Jim.
All right. All right. Let me get my share screen up here and get the graphics for today on. All right. Y'all see that?
Not yet. I do.
Okay, now you don't. I'm not seeing pictures. I'm not sure where they are. I got to do something to get the pictures back up. There we go. All right. Little bit of moving things around on my screen. Our first question for this review. Oh, we need to pray first. Father God, we thank you for another week. We ask you to keep blessing those who love you, like you bless those who you chose 3,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, whenever that was. It's 3,400 years ago, I think is what the timeline is going to say. Father, we thank you that you're blessing us as part of your family that you've chosen, and give us grace, continue to give us grace and teach us your ways, and just help us to love you and love each other as you've commanded. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
All right.
Amen.
Somebody just texted. Let me see what's on there. Ricky Pennington can't get on for some reason, and Greg, well, I'm going to say we are on make sure if some of them, I think I may have confused them sending out the message with two links. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. Hopefully they'll catch up. I just told them to make sure they use the first link in the email, not the second. I think that's what's probably going on. Guys trying to join on off the email that had the two links on it instead of the phone thing. All right. First question is talking about the Feast of Trumpets in Numbers 29, 1-6. And what did blowing those trumpets represent? That's Rosh Hashanah. That means the head of the year, and that's when they start the Jewish New Year. And the 4 bullet points I have for that is that it represented revelation and called them to a gathering and signals redemption and to bring in the harvest. Anybody got any other thoughts on that, what the trumpets would mean? Anybody want to join in? Ricky's on. I see that. He got on. He was one of them. Michael. Paul is on. All right. Well, okay. Somebody saying something. Paul, did you just come on?
No, I just.
Okay.
I'm not seeing the usual pictures you have. I just see the beginning slide, Jim.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I haven't clicked on it yet. So
okay.
Your facilitator is not facilitating very good. Feast of Trumpets. What does blowing represent? Revelation, gathering, redemption, and harvest. And how did Jesus fulfill this feast once and for all? I've got that he quoted that this is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. That's Luke 22:20. And the trumpets is the announcement of the day of the Lord and the day of the atonement is coming up. Any other thoughts on that about the Feast of Trumpets, which is why I blew that while ago? Well, okay. We'll go on to the next one. Nobody's saying anything, right?
You must be teaching the remedial class here, Jim.
Well, that's okay. And that's not a remedial class. I know that. There's some wise folks on here.
I was speaking for myself.
Well, you usually talk a lot, at least.
It's been a difficult past couple of days. We'll talk later about that.
Next question. This is related to Numbers 33, particularly 38 to 53, and it's covering the death of Aaron. And what can we learn from the death of Aaron? Anybody else got anything on that one?
Well,
I got a list here. My list says,
he was kind of giving
say something.
I was me. That's the noisy one.
That's exactly one of them. Yeah.
I said he was I mean, he was lucky to be alive after what he had done, what he allowed to be done. So
yeah, and he even got crossways with Moses a few times too.
Yeah.
Well, here's my list. Go ahead.
They were brothers, right?
Yeah. Well, I got 5 bullet points. He humbled himself to be under the direction of his younger brother. So that's a big deal. Moses was his little brother. He was a bold speaker. He was loved by the people. And that was demonstrated in the 30 days of mourning when he died. And God spoke directly to him a few times. And you talked about him being the anointed one, and that's part of that. And he was the first high priest. So what can we learn from that? Well, I think one thing is that we're not necessarily the high priest, but in the new covenant, we're in the priesthood of the believers. So we are all have a priestly position in that we can communicate directly with God. And if we listen, he can even communicate back to us. And we have his written word here in front of us that, he communicated to us through that. So I think we can learn all those things, and we can learn to be humble, and we can be bold in presenting the message. And, if we keep ourselves in the right place with God, we're going to be loved by the people around us.
Part of
those things.
And you're probably going to hit on this. I know this comes up in the recent chapters we read, but in my small group discussion, one of the topics are dreams, dreams and visions, and is God speaking to us in dreams? Yes or no? That kind of thing.
Yeah. We'll get to that a little bit.
I didn't want to jump ahead, but
that's one of our things coming up. Yeah.
Hey, one of the things that I'm noticing on this slide here, this slide is showing that this is the tribes that didn't go and take land in Israel. It didn't take. These are the tribes that didn't take the promised land. They asked for land differently than the other Israelites. The Reubens, the Gads, and the Manassas. These were the tribes right here that you have highlighted. Aren't these the tribes that didn't take the land, but God told them to go and fight and battle, and then they could come back to these lands?
Yes, absolutely. That's kind of why I put this in here. I don't think that comes up as one of our questions, but I wanted to kind of highlight that. Was that Brandon that was talking? Is that who that was?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
If you watched any of the videos of our meetings, I always try to show these things. I love the maps, and I've explained before that when we were there, knowing where we were on the map just added a lot to what we were learning and what we were interpreting and what we were understanding. And I think even here, when you're reading through the Bible, knowing where things are helps your understanding. Israel is a small country, and you see over to the left where that line goes off from the middle of Manasseh. I think that's probably about where it's not the same direction. Actually, it goes the other direction, but where the northern limit of Israel is now.
Right.
The Golan Heights, if you see where it says Mount Hermon there,
Right.
excuse me.
Yeah.
It goes up something like this, up to there, and then goes back down to the Dead Sea, or excuse me, down to the Sea of Galilee. It sort of goes in this area up in here and then back down in there. And I'll show another map. There's Damascus right there. I've got some pictures I'm going to show you where we were on Mount Hermon, and we were looking. You could see Damascus from where we were. So we'll get to that in a minute. That's a real good catch there, Brandon. That's pretty good. Yeah, certainly. They did have to send their fighting men in to help take over and drive the Canaanites out. And that's another thing I'm going to talk about, is driving the Canaanites out of the land. That was something that rocked my world 40 years ago, and it took a long time for me to accept that. All right, next question. Anything else anybody wants to talk about that? That was a good point.
Just somebody else is trying to get on, and I just sent them the link that you had on the phone. I said, copy and email it to yourself. That's how I get on. I copy and email the link.
Yeah. Well, I sent the email, but the problem, I think the confusing thing is that I sent two different meeting links, one for tonight and one for this morning.
You got to use the lower one,
the
second one down the email.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell them. And I thank you for taking care of that, Nick. I got.
Yeah, you keep going. I'll communicate. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can be my staff assistant this morning. Appreciate that. All right.
Your staff, huh? Just don't turn me into a snake. I don't want to be a snake. So.
This is the map of the land that was given to the tribes, but the Levites weren't given any particular land. So what were the Levites given is the question.
48 cities.
48 cities, 6 of them were cities of refuge, and they were spread around. I can't tell you exactly where they were, but there are 3 on this side of the Jordan and 3 on this side of the Jordan. This area down in southern Israel is pretty desert, and I don't think it ever was really very much inhabited. So they probably had a city of refuge somewhere up around Jerusalem, which that's a little bitty tiny print, but it ought to be in. There's the Dead Sea. It's right in here. It's in Benjamin. It's right in there somewhere. Tiny print, but it's in that area. So they had one somewhere around in here, and then probably one in here. I think one might have been at wherever Abraham was from. I can't. Yeah, right there, Shechem.
Are you talking about the cities of refuge?
Yeah, you know where they were, Paul?
Yeah, one was Kadesh up in the north.
This one on this side, one on this side of
on the west side.
The west side over here, okay.
Kadesh, right there where it says Naphtali or Naphtali. See Kadesh up there.
Man, you got better eyes than me. Right there's Kadesh, right?
I know some women with that name, Naphtali, a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter.
And then I think Shechem was one.
Yeah, that's the one I was remembering. That's right there, I think.
Yeah, and then what in the south was Hebron or Kiriath Arba, same place.
And there's Jerusalem.
A little bit farther south. There you go.
Getty. Is it down here someplace? Well, anyway, they were spread out, so they didn't have to go too far. What was it, Paul? A day's journey? Is that what they figured?
Yeah. Well, for the cities of refuge.
Yeah.
it may, depending on, of course, where you lived, it may have had to be a farther out. But I know the Levitical towns were, spread out such that people would be able to get them there in a short period of time,
Michael
within
told
a
me.
day.
Michael told me when I first brought this up that a good hiker could cover 30 miles in a day. And they were probably in a lot better shape than we are because they had to walk everywhere. But anyway, they were given to 48 cities and they were to minister to all the tribes. And that's the last question. How is this achieved today? I think that's through local churches, the priesthood of the believer, and individual witnessing. Anybody want to add to that?
Well, the whole purpose was so that people could worship. So that's why, today, the local church is important.
Totally agree. And I think even we as believers are an extension of that individually.
Yep.
And as we grow in what we're doing, we're going to be, stronger in that, I think. Okay, back to the timeline now. We're in Deuteronomy, which is a real short time right before they cross over the Jordan into the Promised Land. So that's coming up end of next week, I believe. I think we'll get finished with Deuteronomy and maybe next weekend get into Joshua when they're going into the Promised Land. So we're at somewhere around, looks like 1250 or so before Christ. Now, I'm going to show you some of our pictures. These aren't necessarily well, this one kind of is. This is up in the Golan Heights, and they would have been wandering in that area during that time. And this was something just thought was kind of funny. You notice I put the pasture up there. It says danger mines, and this is how they find the mines. They have cattle that wander around out in there, and they're letting the cattle find all those mines that have been there since 1971, I believe it is. This was an area that was controlled by Syria before 1971. And when they left, they put mines everywhere. So Israel, they put cows out there, and I guess they can collect the cows because they'll know there wasn't a mine. There's no longer a mine there when one sets on it. So if they get him quick enough, they can have hamburgers. These were our escorts on the way up there. These tanks were running. They weren't just parked. They were sitting there running when we went by. And there were guys, I don't know if you can see in this picture, there were guys out walking around out in here. So that was like, I think they pulled over to let the tour bus go by. And this is the view. I was talking about the view of Damascus is over in this area right here. So if you want to think about that, this could be the road to Damascus that Paul got knocked off of. I don't know if it's the same road or not, but he was headed on the road to Damascus, which is right over there. And I just thought that's kind of a neat little interlude.
Damascus is what? That's where the Palestinians are? Or?
I can't hear you. What?
Is that where the Palestinians are?
I had to put my headphone things on.
You froze. There you go.
All right. Can you hear me now? Can you guys hear me?
I can't hear. There's no hearing.
There's no hearing. Well, let's see. The vault microphone has changed.
Now it
can. You
can.
Hear me?
Yep.
All right. Now we're good. I can hear a lot better. The speakers on.
Who lives in Damascus? Who lives over there? Is that a fortified border right there? Or?
No, are you talking about now? That's the capital, I think, of Syria. It's a big city.
Palestinians that live there, or a mix of people?
No. It's the Syrians. The Syrians are another country. Syria is. Let me go back to the map here. Let me.
I know Syria is another country, but it's occupied by.
I can show you where it is here.
It's to the north, right?
Syria is
kind of here. It goes up that way. Lebanon is right here. Lebanon's here, and there's a border between Syria and Lebanon that goes something like that. And Syria is over in this area. This doesn't show Damascus, but I think Mount Hermon is somewhere in this area, and Syria is off to the east. Damascus is off to the east a little bit. So it's this area right here, Syria. All right. Come on now. Let's get back. All right. Back to our questions. Don't make it too big. King Og in Deuteronomy 3:11 was a giant, and he was against Israel. With God on their side, what was the outcome of that battle? That's kind of obvious. Og may have been a giant, but he wasn't a giant to God. He was just some other little critter that God made. So that was an obvious outcome there. And now they want to talk about what giants are in our life that we need God's help. And we can talk about that one for a long time, I think, and that's a good thing. But certainly politics and COVID come to mind first to me. Somebody else talk about what are the giants in your life that you need help with?
Impending retirement.
Hey, I recommend it for everybody.
I'll talk more to Jim later about it, but I have some work issues going on.
Okay.
So,
I think one of the fear, and it could be a fear of anything, but fear
everything's
is a huge, everything, right? Especially nowadays, it's everything is so scary. There's so much fear, and it seems that fear is our greatest giant is as a people today. That's what the biggest giant we have. We're fearful of a lot of things.
Well, somebody, I don't know if it was this discussion, but it's been said, there's anxiety and there's fear. Anxiety is worry about something that isn't necessarily a threat to you. It's you're concerned there could be. You're worried about something that there's nothing you can do about it. Why worry? Where fear is something that's an actual threat. There's something like COVID is an actual threat we have to deal with. And actually, I don't. I'm taking the precautions, and I just became eligible to get vaccinated because I have heart disease. So that made me eligible. Louisiana, that just opened the door for me. But I don't have anxiety about it. There's just other things, impending retirement. Am I doing the right thing at the right time? Do I have enough resources to sustain myself for the next however years of my wife? Those are the things that make me anxious.
I agree. Yeah.
I can solve the political issue by keeping the TV off.
Amen to that.
I can't do much about national politics. I have some local politics about I need to stop flooding in my neighbors, and we're heading in the right direction. But we've got a non-responsive local council rep who runs by my house every day. He jogs every day. He's non-responsive, and he's running for a new higher office in the same government structure. And so I'm supporting the candidate for the first time. I've got a sign on my front lawn supporting another candidate who's a new face, new ideas, and I'm taking a stance because of that. And again, I'm acting on that, so I feel good about that. But the work thing is basically based on, can I afford to retire and live, have a standard of living I'd like to have.
That's something that at 40 that you don't worry about very much, and at 40 you need to be making those plans. Mm-hmm. And I certainly didn't. I just I always thought something's going to happen between now and then, and I'm not going to have to worry about retirement. I just always thought something bad's going to happen. I don't know. The world's going to come to an end. Jesus is going to come back. You know, whatever. I just never really planned as well as I should have. You know, you know, Nick, we make pretty good salaries, and
Right.
we have for a long time, and that, I guess that's my saving economic factor, that, you know, once I did start getting close to retirement, I was able to throw enough aside to get, you know, where I'm going to be okay. I'm not real worried about the financial part now. Plus, my dad was unbelievable in the way he saved, so that kind of set me up pretty good too. But yeah, there's things that happen even in small things in our everyday life that some people get concerned about. You know, like some people worry about going out the front door with all the COVID stuff going on. I don't. It hasn't made a big difference in my life. I wear a mask when I have to, but you know, it's not something I'm concerned about. I try to keep my health up and keep my immune system going. I fall into that obese category, so I probably would qualify to get a vaccine too. Plus, I'm over 65.
You'd be qualified in Louisiana.
I think I'm qualified in Kentucky too, because I'm 65, almost 62. But not real worried about it.
The Russians have a COVID vaccine that's a traditional type vaccine that's made from a deadened virus or a weakened virus. Not this gene therapy shot.
Yeah. Well, I wonder about Russians. You know, Michael, you're a civil engineer, and Nick, you're a civil engineer. I can remember a story going around back, you know, when they were still the Soviet Union, that the way they tested their bridges was they drove trucks full of rocks out on them and cut and dumped them until the bridge fell down, and the last guy in the truck went down the bridge. So I don't know about their testing procedures. I don't know if I trust them.
You should hear the story about an American that went up with some cosmonauts. You know, I watch some of these space exploration programs sometimes, and how the Russians were so unprepared. I mean, these guys are out there, right? You know, the Soyuz craft and things, and they had some, I think it might have been a British guy, but they had to do some maneuver that they never really practiced. It was just crazy. It was just things like, it's kind of like you said. They just don't. They're not as thorough as our people are.
Well, they're not.
And they've had more accidents. I think they've had more accidents.
Just don't publicize it.
Right. Yeah, not for 40 or 50 years. It didn't come out at the time, you know. So.
I can't remember which mountain this picture was from. I think it may have been from the one down in the south, looking toward. This was from way over there in Moab, looking back, and the Dead Sea is, I think, in this area right here. But over these mountains, Jerusalem was over in this area, but you can see all the way to the Mediterranean out there. And I think that's probably close to 100 miles inland. And I remember, I mean, it's easy to see that that's possible, because I remember the first time I went out west, there was a sign on, what is it, I-70 or whichever one goes toward Denver, that you come over this hill, and the sign says Denver 110, and you can see the Rocky Mountains out there. And Denver's on this side of the Rocky Mountains. So, you know, you're seeing, and when we were in Alaska, we saw Mount McKinley from probably 150 miles away. So when the air is clear, you can see a long, long way from this kind of elevation. I think one of these mountains I heard it described as being at 10,000 feet elevation. And I think it was this one. I think that's why I chose this. But I can't remember which mountain it was. Paul, you have any insight on that? Or Dave? Nobody knows for sure, but it,
I'm not familiar with that, Jim.
yeah, one of the mountains. This is Moses' snake, the two snakes um, on the staff, kind of. I don't want to call it a statue or a memorial. This is a Moses memorial place, and it was one of the places where it described Moses right before he died, went up and looked into the promised land. But I can't remember which mountain it was. That's why I picked it. And now I forgot. I should have wrote a note. I don't seem to have one. The next time I'm going to do better. Anyway, that's just a side picture. Get out of the way. All right. Next question has to do with the Ten Commandments. Deuteronomy 5, 6 to 21, Matthew 22, 27 to 40. I typoed there. Sorry about that. What was the reason Jesus spoke those words? And he was summarizing the. He was asked what was the most important law, what was the greatest law, and or what was the greatest commandment, and his response was to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, and love in the second, like it to the first, to love your neighbor as yourself. And what was the purpose of the Ten Commandments? And that was, I think, to ground the people in the truth. So, what say ye?
Said to ground them in the truth is what you said?
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
Well, it's a moral code. It's a moral code to live by. You know, I had dinner with a friend of mine last night, you know, and he challenged me, he said, what's one word you would use to describe the Bible? What is there one word you could put forward? I'm like, gee, you know, I don't know. I was thinking. He says, well, he had a word, and he said, life. It means life. You know, everything in it is to sustain life. You know, for God's purpose. You know, and He created the life, and if you do these things, it certainly does promote living and not dying.
Well, our culture is founded on this, and
right.
I mean, we're not the whole world, but at least the part that we know that this is the basis of what we believe.
But the Ten Commandments, if I have this right, aren't they also part of the Quran? Aren't they contained? We share 5 books.
I'm not sure of that.
Well, I mean,
I think there is. I really do.
We share books, right, in the Quran.
Yeah, but they certainly don't.
They
wouldn't
changed
accept
things when Allah came along. I mean,
I know, but they wouldn't. I would be surprised that they would accept as scripture things that we accept after Abraham. You know, because they went off in a different direction with Ishmael.
right.
And I don't know for sure. I know they recognize some of our prophets as prophets, and that's what they call Jesus.
Right.
Jesus
They
was
call him a prophet. Right.
So, you know, from that standpoint, maybe they look at Moses being prophetic. I'm not sure. I think their basic right and wrong is kind of similar. They add a whole bunch of things to it, but
The thing is, though, if you speak poorly or badly about their prophet, then they put you to death. So
yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at some of the passages coming up in the days between.
Well, I know
what we've done.
that was then, not today.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. That's one of the things that I want to talk about. And saying that this is the basis of our culture kind of goes into that. That's the beginning of that discussion right there. This is the basis of our culture, and whether or not we follow all of it's a totally different question, different discussion.
But it's a moral code.
Yes,
it's a moral code. You know,
absolutely.
They try to say you can't legislate morality, but
every law is every law is legislating morality.
The moral code.
Yeah. But I mean, you look at every law on there. You know, if you can't go more than 35 miles an hour in a city, that's legislative morality in a way.
Well,
They all are.
that's a life safety issue. I got a 35-mile-an-hour sign right in front of my house. I'm looking at it.
I think one in my yard says 45. But those big trucks coming from the
You
steel
live
mills-
life in the fast lane, Jim.
Well, yeah, and those trucks from the steel mills go by at about 60 sometimes. I wonder about that.
There's my sign right there. See.
All right, Deuteronomy 9:1-7, talking about going in and taking the giants in the land. This guy right here, this is a real guy. This is a Russian around the turn of the century. I think he was 9'4". I thought I wrote a note on that, but his name was, I did write a note, but I can't find it now.
He was a Russian.
He was a Russian, but he met with, he was world famous, and every leader in the world wanted to meet with him. He met with, I think it was Theodore Roosevelt that had him come to the White House.
Yeah.
The Pope had him come to the Vatican in Rome, and everybody wanted to meet him because I think this was the tallest guy that ever recorded in written history, as far as the modern world knows. I think he was 9'4".
9'4".
I think that's what he was.
Robert Wadlow, the American, I'm looking at it, he was 8'11".
That's pretty close.
There's a statue in his honor in Alton, Illinois. I've been to it.
Wow.
Well, okay. Our question. So, if you're looking at a whole society, civilization of guys that look like that, and God tells you to go over there, and you're going to go against them. So, what kind of emotions would you have felt if you're being told to go over there and conquer people that look like that? I think you'd be afraid, but I think you're confident too, because by this time they spent 40 years wandering around in the wilderness, and God has brought them through miraculous things lots of times. So I think they'd be somewhat fearful, but they'd be confident, because God did not intend to give them false hope, but that He was the one behind them, and He crossed over before them. So they would have confidence.
Think too about the military of the Israelites. They were probably in their. Why am I getting an echo?
I don't know, Nick.
I didn't change anything.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm still hearing it, but the men that, again, I'm assuming it's all men that went to battle. They were born out during the Exodus. They didn't know the pleasures of living in Egypt when it was nice before it got bad. So they had hard living from birth. So, to me, I'm like, they were probably better equipped mentally to say, you know what, we can do this, even though they had their doubts, and they certainly could probably run faster. But,
well, I'm sure they had been battle hardened too.
Right. But also their daily living. I mean, they didn't have easy childhoods. They couldn't have.
Right. Well, they were slaves in Egypt, but they were used to, the slave mentality is a lot different than.
But what I'm saying is the ones that went to battle probably weren't the ones that walked out of Egypt.
Right. That's exactly true.
They were born after their parents left Egypt.
Yeah, that whole generation was gone.
That whole generation passed.
Right.
Now we're at the end of the journey. Now we're going into the land's promised. Yeah. That was a whole new generation, and all they knew was we're out in the. What's that? Oh, hey. Anyway, so I just had that thought, so I didn't think about that until we had the discussion. So.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I agree.
You take a kid that grows up, let's just say on the wrong side of the tracks in the tough neighborhood, who's surviving day in, day out. That's a tough kid. Mm-hmm. Either succumbs to it, or he learns how to survive. Either through might or brain, smarts, one or the other, or both. So I don't know. It's just a thought I had. Maybe that's the Spirit talking to me. I don't know.
So how do we apply that today? What promise was given to them and to us today that is similar? And my response to that one is that Jesus said to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. He didn't say take on Christianity and everything is going to be fine and hunky-dory and you're going to be blessed all over in everything you do. He said, take up your cross and follow me. And he told his disciples that you guys are going to run into all kinds of opposition. And I'm pretty sure he told them that they'd all end up giving their life for him. So, it's not, Christianity is not an easy thing, but we have confidence that God is behind us. God is with us. He's in front of us, behind us, and has our flanks on both sides. Anybody else? Let's see. After we get done talking about this, I want to get into what all this part we're reading has meant to me 40 years ago, and the struggle I went through, and some of you might be going through it too, or have been through it. The warning in Deuteronomy 13, 1 to 11. That was where he basically told them, even if, no matter if it's somebody you love, and they're leading you from God, from Yahweh to some other false god, that you certainly don't follow them. And then, you were talking about the harshness of the Old Testament a little bit ago, Nick, that, you put these people to death, even if it's somebody you love. And I'm not sure that happens very often. We look at some of the things that God told them to do in the Old Testament as being too harsh for our understanding. And I think it might have been too harsh for their understanding too, because it doesn't talk about that happening very often. And they certainly got off into the weeds a lot of times as Israel went through their history. And the next thing is, how can we? Well, anybody want to have any input on that part of the discussion? And we'll talk about it a lot more here, because I want to address this in depth in a minute. Anybody want to say anything about it? How can we apply this today? Particularly, and why must we still be cautious of this today? I think particularly in this last election, we saw a lot of people claiming to be prophets that were predicting things that didn't happen. And there's still some people following some of that. And I think we certainly need to use our discernment to watch for that kind of stuff.
Hey, Jim.
Yes.
So I don't know, and then what could you read Deuteronomy 13 verse 5? I don't know that they do it there or not, but it just I got a part of it underlined, and it talks about the prophets and dreamers and stuff, and I got underlined, you must purge the evil from among you. That's underlined.
Well, that's what I want to talk about. That's
Bingo.
exactly what I want to talk about. That's
Bingo.
That's what when I was raised Catholic. Paul wanted us to tell a little bit of our story. He mentioned it last week after Land did his unbelievable discussion about the way he grew up. I guess this is a good time that I'll go ahead and tell a little bit of my background. I was raised Catholic. I grew up on a farm till I was 8 years old in rural Kentucky. My parents moved to Louisville, moved to Elizabethtown, small town, when I was 8, and then moved to Louisville when I was 11. And so my teenage years were in Louisville. I was Catholic, stayed Catholic until when I was in college. I was still Catholic, was kind of marginal. They have Newman centers at most colleges, is what they call their on-campus Catholic chapel thing. And I would go to church on Sunday at the Newman Center. That's about all I would do. When I got out of college, out of graduate school, lived in Lexington, Kentucky, I decided that I needed to, part of being an adult was to get serious about my faith. So I tried a couple of Catholic churches in Lexington and just didn't connect. And then went to a few of the, Nick, you're Methodist, I think. I don't know if I went
Go
to
to Methodist church now, yeah, but I
I
grew
don't know
up
if I
Catholic.
went to a Methodist church or not, but I tried some of those that were kind of formal churches like that. I know I went to a Lutheran church. It was almost, Lutherans are almost Catholic. And went to a few other like Episcopal, Presbyterian kind of churches and didn't really connect. And then I went to a Christian church, an independent Christian church. Paul here is a pastor, the one here in Carrollton, it's the same group. Paul, did you know there was Southern Acres Christian Church in Lexington?
Yes.
Yes.
Wally Rendell was the pastor.
Wally Winder. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was first Sunday I went, he was speaking directly to me. He had my number, and I went back and it was getting into springtime, and they had sign-ups for no, that's not right. The first church I went to was in the springtime. Before the first Christian church I went to, before I went to that one, was a different. I think it was Tate's Creek Christian Church, same brand, but a different church. And they were going to have sign-ups for their softball team. And I looked around and I didn't see anybody that was going to be young enough to play softball in the church. So I decided that the preaching was good, but I didn't think I fit in. So we went to this other church next time, and their softball players were all my age. So he preached to me, plus their softball team was good. And I ended up going there for a while, and eventually I went through a lot of struggle with that. I was baptized in the Catholic Church. I was raised in the Catholic Church. I went to Catholic elementary school. Went through all the catechism stuff, and I was convinced that I was Christian. And Paul, I think you'll probably back this up, that the teaching of the independent Christian church was that you got baptized by immersion. And I had not been baptized that way. I'd been sprinkled like all Catholics were. And I had this long discussion with Wally over several months about immersion. And finally, when I accepted that it was an act of obedience on my part to become a full believer and be baptized by immersion, I thought, now I've got to tell my parents about it. And my parents are still Catholic. They died Catholic. But when I told them, it was on a Saturday night. They had come to Lexington. They lived in Bowling Green, 180 miles away. And they had come to spend the weekend with us. And I told them on the Saturday night, I think my dad or my mom says, well, where are we going to church? When are we going to church in the morning? I thought, well, okay, this is the time to say it. And it was 11 o'clock at night. And I said, well, I got to tell you, I'm not going to the Catholic Church anymore. And I had to tell them this before I got baptized. And I told them that, and my parents just totally blew up. And didn't say much, got in the car at 11 o'clock at night and drove 180 miles home. And didn't speak to us at all for 6 months. Wouldn't even answer the phone when I called.
Wow.
If they called, they'd hang up on me. And Wally, Paul, do you know Wally?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
Wally told me it was my responsibility to keep the communication open. So we made extra effort to go down there and visit. And, my brothers and sisters were all living at home then. And I was the oldest, so they were all still home. So I'd go down, I'd visit my brothers and sisters, and, my mom and dad wouldn't even acknowledge that we were there. And eventually we bought a vacation condominium thing and asked them to go on vacation with us. And they did that. They went on vacation, and we redeveloped a relationship starting on from there, and ended up everything got healed. They never brought it up again. I'm not sure how much they accepted, but it at least our person-to-person relationship got healed. But as part of my early belief, when we moved to Louisville, we lived in Lexington, I think in 1979, 80, and early 81, we moved to Louisville and started going to Southeast Christian Church, which I had gone to Southeast Christian Church with my wife. She was there. She went there when she was in high school. And so I had been going there when it used, Southeast Christian is a mega church now. They've got probably got 20,000 members, something like that.
Yeah, 25 over 5 or 6 campuses.
Yeah, it's a huge mega church. When I was going there at first, it was meeting in a small little building that had 300 seats. You went there, Paul, when about the time they moved from that building into the first big one, right?
Right. 85, 86.
And 85 was when they built the first big building.
Right.
So you went to I want to call it the first building. It was actually their second building, but the one that had 200-300 seats.
Right. I was on Hikes Lane.
Right. Yeah, both of them on Hikes Lane, but
right.
I played in the creek behind the First Southeast.
Well, that's where I met you, Greg. I've talked about knowing Greg for 152 years. That's where I
Wait a minute. I ain't that old yet.
It's been a long time. But I started reading when I first accepted Christ and developed a personal relationship. I decided I needed to read the Bible instead of just getting what I was getting on Sunday morning. So when I got to this section, this particular section right here, and I sent a text message about this, I think yesterday, and Nick started to ask about the same thing, that I had a hard time with God. I could see getting into war and having to fight and kill in war, but I had a hard time accepting that you kill the women and children. And it took me a long, long time to get over that, to understand it. I don't know about getting over it's the right word, to understand the reason. But I mean, the basic way to say it, as I understand it, is he was cleansing the land, very similar to the way he cleansed the land in the flood. And that this was the land that he promised to give to Abraham, and it was being defiled. And the way God describes that being defiled just touches the surface on how bad it was. Archaeology and history describes things those Canaanites were doing that just, it was completely unacceptable. And from a spiritual sense, it certainly needed to be cleansed, but even from the physical sense, the requirements not to intermarry with the people they were going into were important, because history and archaeology shows that sexually transmitted diseases were about to destroy those people in the world. That they were just overwhelmed with sexually transmitted diseases, and that was because their idol worship required that they go to the temple and make use of their temple prostitutes. And that was a fertility practice. They had fertility gods, and in the worship act of sex, that by doing that fertility action, it was supposedly bringing on fertility for your crops and for your livestock and all that those two were tied together. And if you look at in Matthew 8 and Mark 5 and Luke 8, when Jesus encountered this Gadarene demoniac, the man of the tombs that came in was uncontrollable, or was possessed by a legion of demons, and the legion of demons told Jesus, "Don't cast us into the darkness, cast us into those pigs over there." It kind of gives you this thought that the demonic didn't want to be cast out of this world, that they needed something to inhabit to stay in this realm, and they wanted to go to those pigs so that they could stay in this realm. But Jesus got the last laugh anyway, because the pigs ran into the lake and drowned. So they ended up going back to wherever they came from anyway. But if you think about that concept, that the demonic needs a body to hang on to, that the Canaanites were just saturated with demonic activity, and God had to cleanse that from the Holy Land, that he couldn't allow devils to occupy the Holy Land. And that was his reason for killing women and children as well as the men, I think. And it's no different than the flood. So, what I had to finally accept in my mind, that killing those women and children was no different than what happened in the flood, that there were women and children killed during the flood too. And it's the same spiritual concept. So it took me a long time to get over that. And if we look at what we talked about earlier, that the law, we're based on the Judeo-Christian ethic, and we face the same exact problems today. We talked about that a little bit a week or two ago when we were talking about the Moloch worship, the sacrifice of the children to Moloch or Baal in the fire, that they required human sacrifice, and that the younger the child sacrifice, they considered it a more pure sacrifice, the younger the sacrifice was. It was part of their thinking, and that we carried that through to today. We killed over 60 million babies before they were born in this country, and I think America and the rest of the world is deep in judgment. And I really don't see us being much different than Israel developed into, because they didn't go in and do what God told them to do. They didn't kill all the women and children. They made treaties with them and accepted them and put them into their society, and eventually became what they were. They were offering their own children to the gods. So that's my story, and I think it's just something that I had to go through to. Well, anyway, that certainly I didn't have my dad put in prison or anything like that. I didn't have to overcome that. I did. I mean, I've talked with Nick. We grew up from humble beginnings, and I think we can credit our parents for giving us the drive to succeed in the world, and I think we can also credit our parents to some extent for giving us the insights to be where we are spiritually too. Somebody else talk a lot. I've been going a long time.
There's a lot of feedback from someone. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
I don't
background.
Yeah, I didn't hear that. Anybody else?
Yeah, Jim, it's Dave Colbert.
Yeah.
I just, I think what you're saying is right. It is a hard concept, but back when Abraham is promised the promised land by God, he doesn't get to go in. It says Genesis 16, he says, but in the fourth generation, so a few hundred years after that is when his people, which we know would be the children of Israel, says, but in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So God's watching these people. To your point, they're very immoral, but at least at this point, 400 years earlier, there were still some good people there, still hope of them being saved. And so God waits. And we see this, God's very patient. So it's 400 years later when he finally says, all right, it's over. And very similar with the flood. We see, in Genesis 6, God says, he's grieved in his heart and he's sorry that he's going to have to do this. And then it takes Noah 100 years to build the ark. And while he's doing this, we learn from Peter's writings that he preached this whole time, but you don't get that when you read the story there. So for 100 years, God has Noah preaching to the people to try to give them an opportunity to turn. And so I think that helps. That God was patient with the people of Canaan. He was giving them a chance to turn around. He's also patient with the people in the flood, trying to give them a chance by way of Noah's preaching to turn around. But in the end, God is concerned about our souls and not our physical well-being. So, the reason we're here is to take this test so that we'll one day be with Him. And in the flood, and also with the people in Canaan, they were so corrupt. Everything was just going the wrong way. And they were taking people with them by their influence and the things, what they were doing. So it is a hard thing to accept, but that's, the flood, you make a good point. It's a very parallel to what happened when the Israelites go in and clean out Canaan in order to occupy it. It's a restart of godly principles and trying to get people, godly people, to inhabit the earth and to influence those around them.
Absolutely. That's what has kept me going over these years, to know that I'm on that track, that I'm constantly growing toward the Lord. And I've been a believer for 40 years, and I've had setbacks along the way, and I've had peaks and valleys, and I'm trying to keep the overall track going toward God. Not that I'm working for my salvation. I think my salvation would have been assured even when I was at the bottom of the peaks.
I don't know why I'm getting darker and lighter. The sun's coming up. It's changed. My question to Jim was, so what happened to the souls of these people that were cleaned out? Was there a chance of redemption for them? Or that, can they be redeemed after they're killed?
Probably not. I mean, we're not privy to all of God's decisions and each individual's decision and relationship, but from what we see of them, and certainly the Bible doesn't tell us everything, from what we see in the Bible, they probably went to their judgment seat with the devil beside them and not with Christ beside them. That's what they were serving, and that's why they were wiped out.
I guess they're kept separate from God, which is not a happy place.
Right.
Right.
It's not our call, but that's the evidence we see.
I guess the point is that did they know better, for what they were doing? Did they have a chance? Did they turn from God or did they just never know any better? It's just like when you hear about a tribe in the wilderness who, they've never been introduced to Christianity. To me, they're innocents in some ways.
That's an age-old question.
Yeah, it is. I guess I won't get answered today.
Well, I think Dave,
This
you're
is Brandon.
Go ahead.
Hey, I got a question. Okay, so listening to all this, so I had a couple of years ago met this gentleman that extremely brilliant guy. I mean, he owns a company that multi-million-dollar company. He's doctorate in physics and everything. This is a really smart guy. And because I work with a younger guy who he's a Southern Baptist preacher. I mean, this kid is, and when I say kid, he's 23, 24 years old. He is the quintessential what you believe that a Southern Baptist preacher is. He's fire and brimstone on Sunday. He's I make fun of him because I tell him that he carries around a rag to wipe the slobber off his face. And this guy and I have kind of grown in relationship. Well, when we met this gentleman that, really smart guy, we really thought, a lot of him. And we got this young guy brings up every time is Jesus. Do you know Jesus? That's his favorite. Do you know Jesus? And this guy looked at him and said, "Hey, I grew up Catholic. I was raised Catholic. I lived my whole life as Catholic. I believe that Jesus was around. I believe that there is a God." He says, "But I'm angry." He says, "How can God send people to hell that don't know him?" He said, this guy was from Vietnam. He said, "I was fortunate enough to get out of Vietnam. My parents brought me from Vietnam." He said, "But there's people in Vietnam that I know to this day that don't know Jesus and don't know that." He says, "And it makes me so angry that they're condemned to hell." And this young guy, in my mind, he put it right. He says, everyone has a choice. Everyone will have that opportunity to know that there is a God and that there is a Jesus and that there is salvation. Everyone. And you have that opportunity. And this guy, the Vietnamese guy he was completely adamant about, no, if there's a loving God that loves everybody, that he wouldn't send people to hell. And listening to all you guys talk about that, it really puts it really puts that into my head.
And I mean, it's something I think that I was going to, before Brandon started talking, I mean, that's the same question I was going to bring up. Dave, are you still with us? You know where things are real well, and I'm sure Paul does too. But I think Paul addressed that. I believe it was Paul who addressed it. That even those who are beyond the reach of the gospel at that time can see who God is in nature. And I'm not knowledgeable enough to know where all the scriptures are, but I'm pretty sure there is one. Isn't there, Paul or David or somebody else that might know?
Romans 1.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Paul.
No, go ahead. Is that what you were thinking, Romans 1?
Same thing, yes. Yep. So Romans 1, just something, the two gentlemen here that have talked about this, it's a good thing to consider. We say this, so there's people that never have had an opportunity. So Romans 1, starting verse 18, I'm going to read this for you from the New King James Version. It's pretty clear that the concept that no one, or that people don't have an opportunity to seek out God is a false statement based on what we read here. So starting verse 18, it says this: "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them." So you're saying, well, what's he shown them? Well, verse 20 says, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened." So here's the idea. God has made creation to point to him. And that's what it's saying here again. It says it is clearly seen and being understood by the things that are made. That's in verse 20. So that you should understand that there is a creator, and it makes folks without excuse. So that's the first step, really, in your faith to God, is recognizing creation and it's pointing to God. We'll give you one more here. These two are together are pretty strong. But in Psalms 19, there's a similar thing that's said. So back in the Old Testament here. So Psalms 19, we'll read verse 1 through, about through verse 6. So Psalms 19, verses 1 through 6 says this: The heavens proclaim the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day into day utters speech, and night into night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. So what is he saying here? He's saying the heavens are screaming at you that God exists. The firmament shows his handiwork. And then he's going on to say, day into day utters speech, and night into night reveals knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. So his point is, I don't care where you live on the earth, whether you're in China or Russia or whatever, you see creation. And creation is screaming at you that God exists, and it should draw you to him. So verse 4, their line has gone out throughout all of the earth, and their words to the end of the world. What words? Again, he's just talking purely about creation here and saying everyone can see creation. Creation has been designed to point you to God. So whether it's the American Indian or whether it's people in China that are deep in the country of China, doesn't matter. They're all exposed to creation. And God expects you to seek him out by way of creation. Now, I want to put one more thing in your mind, then I'll back out here. In Romans, back to Romans there, Romans 1 is where we, in verse 18 through 21 is where we just took that from, that creation makes you without excuse, no matter where you live. And then in chapter 2, I'm going to read you a little excerpt here, which is going to say simply this, that you are responsible for what you've been exposed to, and God exposes you to creation, and it should cause you to seek him out. But here it is. So Romans 2:11 says, there is no partiality with God, for as many have sinned without the law will also perish without the law. As many as sinned with the law will be judged by the law. For not the hearers of the law are just in the sight of God, but the doers of the law. For when Gentiles, so now he's pointing to people who did not have the law. He says, for when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do the things contained in the law, although not having the law, are a law to themselves, who show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and between themselves their thoughts accusing or excusing them, in the day when God will judge the secrets of men by Jesus Christ according to my gospel. So he looks back to the Gentiles and makes this point. He says, look, people who had the law were judged by the law, but the Gentiles who didn't have the law, they were judged by nature. So now we're back again. So creation, they would be judged by creation, who should have drawn them to God, and their conscience. And so although the Israelites had an advantage, I'm gonna throw some other things out here, and I know it's a lot, but Galatians chapter 3 says the old law was a tutor to bring us to Christ. So the Israelites had an advantage in that they had the law, but the people who were Gentiles still had a chance. They had creation and their conscience, and God would judge them by that and not by the law, because they didn't have the law. So I think if you stir all this together, what you get is this: you're judged by what God has given to you, what you're responsible for. The Israelites would have been judged by the law because they had it, and it was an advantage to them. The Gentiles, however, didn't have the law, and so their judgment would be slightly less, in that they would be judged by what creation would draw them to God, and by their conscience, the knowledge of good and evil. And so it kind of makes it fair and helps you understand that the God's not going to put something on you that you weren't aware of, but there are things that you cannot escape and that no one can escape, and that's creation and your conscience. So if that's all you have, then that's what you're judged by. So hopefully that's clear. I'm going to shut up now.
No,
Good job, David.
I really
You don't
appreciate
need
that.
to.
Yeah, that was great. That was really good. I really appreciate that. I went back and highlighted all that so that when I see this guy again, I can show him scripture and tell him this is what this is what God said. That explained it to me on how I can witness to him how to bring that about. That was so awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. That was very good. But I would say this: if growing up in the wilderness and not having any contact with, like you said, the law to believers and what have you, nature would tell me, well, we have what we have because of the sun. It rises every day and sets every night and grows the crops and the trees and gives us, sustains life. And I can see why you had sun worshipers.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Which, I mean, and again, they're following what nature is telling them. And I don't know if they have a conscious enough to say, but where I would, me with the child's curiosity that I hope I still have to today is like, well, who made the sun?
Well,
I mean, that's a leap to say it's only through the observance of nature that you're going to come to that same conclusion. I think you did a very good job. Don't let me, I couldn't have done that, what you just did. And thank you for sharing that. I'll have to study that, but that's a leap.
Well, let me discuss that leap you're talking about.
Who made the sun?
What'd you say, Greg?
Who made the sun? I like that leap.
Yeah, that was good. If you think about, if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon and you watch other people looking at the Grand Canyon, you're standing there in this unbelievable sense of awe. And you hear people saying, how can you look at this and not believe in God? And that is approaching nature worship, like you're talking about there, Nick. But what seems to happen so many times when a culture starts worshiping nature that way is, I believe that angels and demons are active in our world today, and I believe that idols and false gods are actually devils, and are influencing people, and that some of them are strong enough that they can influence an entire society. And if you look at a jungle tribe or a Mexican Aztec tribe or the Canaanites or anybody that hasn't been exposed to God, that sees nature and sees and starts in their heart looking for God in nature, it often leads to that demon walking right in and teaching them that nature is the God, and they end up worshiping the demonic part of nature as opposed to the God part of nature. So they made a choice. When that happens, they've made a choice to follow the wrong side. And it may be, we look at it from our viewpoint and say that's not fair because nobody's gone in and told them about Yahweh. Nobody's told them about God. Nobody's told them about Jesus. That's one of those things that's, we'll find out about in eternity, but we don't know everything that's in God's plan, and we don't know everything he decides. And it's like you were asking earlier about what happened to these Canaanites that were destroyed by Israel. We have evidence that what God's plan is in the Bible that he's written, and that's all we can make our decision on, but it's not our decision.
Hey,
go ahead.
Jim, I was just going to add, and if you go on what Dave read in Romans 1, if you pick back up in verse 21, it says, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, because their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like a mortal human being and birds and animals and reptiles. And then in verse 25, it says, they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and they worship and serve the created things rather than the creator.
Where was that again?
Romans 1, just a little bit after what David read. And so to me, what Paul was saying was, the whole point of creation, God created what he created was to lead people to know him. Well, we also know that those people worshiped the things that were created and not the creator. And that's what happens in the world today as well.
In a men's group I was in for a short while at my church, they call Iron Men, they meet at 6 a.m. One of the points of discussion, it was a lively debate between two of the participants on whether we have a chance for salvation after death, or does it end at death? Okay. And one of the persons believed in that there's still a chance even after you die, and the other one was adamant, no, that's it. Once you quit breathing, that you're done. If you didn't accept Christ, etc., and what you could do on your deathbed, it's something you.
Yeah.
One of my pastors, one of his heartaches was a brother who would not even accept Jesus on his deathbed. But anyway, I thought it was a interesting discussion, and I had never entered my head that, is salvation still possible even after death? So.
Hey, Nick, I know that'd be a lengthy discussion, but in Hebrews we read it's appointed that a man wants to die and then the judgment. We die, and then we're judged.
Luke 16 would back that same thing up, what Paul's saying there also. You read Luke 16, 19 through the end of the chapter, story of Lazarus, Lazarus and the rich man there. Backs it. It's that same thing. So
I'm looking at Greg. Greg, didn't you kind of almost have a deathbed conversion?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's, do you feel comfortable talking about that?
Say it again.
Do you feel comfortable talking about that?
Oh, yeah, I do. But see, Jim, I have a testimony, and it's written in one of the addresses of all these people, and I was going to send it to them.
Well, how about, Paul wants, and Greg's testimony probably will rival Lance's. It'll be as good as what we did last week, maybe better. I just, as we're talking about through all this, it just occurred to me, and I wanted to ask him about that. But I would really like you, Greg, instead of writing that and sending it, could you tell us that next week? Could you do your testimony next week?
Yeah, I reckon.
Would you feel more comfortable writing it?
Well, I can do it now if you want.
Well, I don't want to do it now because I got to get off here in 30 minutes because Kim has a meeting coming up.
All right.
Yeah. And I think, your testimony will drag this out a lot longer.
There ain't much to it, but okay.
It'll bring up a lot of discussions, Greg. You have a great testimony.
Jim, I wanted the address of all these people too.
Okay. We have email addresses for not all of them. We don't have David's. Let's see who's on here. I think I have email addresses for everybody except Dave Colbert's on here right now. Colbert. Yeah, I've got email addresses on that list I put on there the other day. Has everybody's email address on it except Dave Colbert. Dave, I need your email address.
Yeah, last Monday you sent one out, Jim.
Yeah, I sent the list on the text message Monday that had a whole bunch of email addresses on it. And I can help you with that, Greg.
Hi.
I'll help you with that. Greg's testimony is as good or better than Lance was.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah, it sure was.
Man.
I look forward to hearing that, but my wife's coming home today after being gone 2 weeks, so I got about 3 hours to get things clean.
We've been on a while, so yeah. I don't get into Greg's now because we'll end up talking for another hour about Greg.
I look forward to that. Can I ask one thing? Could we maybe consider having a ground rule that if you're not going to speak, to mute your microphone? Because I'm just getting a lot of background noises and
Well,
interferences.
that's a good rule, but I'm looking
Oh,
on
good.
looks to me like everybody's not talking is
Right. It's going to take time to adjust to that, but like I'll do it now anymore, and now you can hear me. So
yeah.
it's not hard to do, and I know we're still on a learning curve, but it would be helpful because I was having a hard time hearing Jim on some.
Well, that may be me. I'm on this little thing right here. I don't know how well this microphone picks up.
Your volume just doubled. Whatever you
Well,
did.
Yeah.
okay. This is why right here. Can you see what I'm doing? So that's
No.
not feedback. That's me. I actually, when Kim was setting this Zoom thing up, we bought a camera for doing these things, and I guess maybe I need to learn to use that because it has a good microphone on it. I paid a bunch of money for something that's in a box somewhere just for that purpose. So I need to figure out how to do that.
Just go get one of those cameras that make you look like a cat, you know.
No, don't want to. I don't know. Maybe some cats look better than me. All right. This has been another great meeting. I love these Sunday morning or Saturday morning meetings. Especially when people open up and people have. And I would encourage. There's 8 on here right now. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 of us on here right now. I think that's the most we've had. And I would encourage you to, tell other folks that might want to join us, particular ones that are on our list, like Brandon. You need to talk to Kevin a little bit, and some other folks. That these meetings are really good. Of course, we're going to have. I've opened up Saturday night now, so hopefully some more will show up tonight.
Jim, is that going to be the same that we've done this morning, basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you want to come in and just fellowship again, there's no real need to. We're going to talk about the same basic stuff.
Refresh my poor memory. What time is that tonight?
8 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got several guys on Central Time Zone too. So I got to push that back a little bit so it'd be later in the day for them if they wanted to join. And Brandon, are you still there? Brandon. I see you're there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Yeah. Okay.
You talked about your friend from Vietnam.
Yeah.
I don't know if you watched the video last week. Our testimony last week was a guy from Vietnam that one you're describing may be one of his brothers. It sounded familiar.
I had read that and I wanted to watch that, and that's my plan is watching that.
Well,
So I'm really interested in it.
It's still on there, and your description. What's this guy's business?
Okay, so I'm with a group that we do predictive maintenance, which is basically we watch machines vibrate, and this guy owns a company that is a predictive maintenance contractor. They go out and do things. He's from Iowa. He's a Vietnamese that moved to Iowa. So
I'm not sure what any of the brothers are. That he described his brothers having several different side businesses, and that sounded like it could have. Nick, doesn't that kind of sound like it could have fit into what he was talking about his brothers doing?
He had brothers that all went on to become highly educated and prosper. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah. You need to watch that. Maybe
one became a preacher, right? A minister, a priest, or
one of them's a Catholic priest. No, his brother, his sister, is a nun, and he's got, I think it was uncles or cousins that were Catholic priests. But he was the younger one. If you caught that, his dad was in prison for 7 years, and all of his older brothers were more than 7 years older than him. So, if you caught that, he would have been born after his dad got out of prison.
And over in Vietnam.
Vietnam, and they lived there for apparently 9 years. He moved here when he was 9, when Glenn was 9. So these brothers are all quite a bit older than him. And they're all, I think all of them were in multiple different technical businesses that it could easily fit into that. But I'm sure there's millions of Vietnamese people. One of the things I thought about last Sunday, we went out after church to lunch with the church group, and one of the guys in the group, I looked around and I was looking for somebody older than me that would have been Vietnam era, and I asked him I told him about Land's Vietnam thing, and he said that when he was in Nam, that was exactly what he did. That he worked with, they call him the ARVIN, ARVIN, and I'm not sure exactly what that stands for, but it was he coordinated with the Vietnamese soldiers that fought with Americans, and that's what Land's dad was. And I'd love to hook them up and let them just talk, and it would be quite the coincidence if they had crossed paths before in Vietnam. I just thought that'd be a neat thing to do. And I want to follow up on that at some point. But maybe Brandon's friend might have a connection too. I don't know. Well, we need to get off here because Kim's going to have another Zoom meeting at 10 o'clock. So I need to let her start getting ready for hers. This is her account, not mine. So I have to defer to that. So can I ask for somebody to volunteer to pray us out? Or do you want me to appoint somebody? You want me to draft somebody to do it? Somebody volunteer. Nick, you're shaking your head. You're the one I was going to pick.
That's not my strength. I'm sorry.
Okay, Ricky, how about you?
I'll do it. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for this group of men that gathers here on Saturday and throughout the week to study your word as we read the Bible through, to gain a better insight and better knowledge of your word and your will for us, Lord. I pray that you will guide and direct each and every one of us this week as we go through our normal daily lives and we continue to study and learn. I ask that you will bless each and every one of us in all that we do. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Do it, Lord.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Can I'd like to challenge all of our guys to do one thing each week. I know we're getting review and everything, but I guess this is one of my one of the things that I've been challenged to do is go back and rememorize verses that I've learned, and maybe just pick out one verse. Doesn't have to be long, but just really try to hide that in our heart. And like this past week, the Shema was in Deuteronomy 6, the greatest commandment. But we all know what the greatest commandment says. When Jesus answered that, and you alluded to that a little bit. In his response to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. But I just want to challenge the guys. That's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm going back and relearning and rememorizing some verses that I need to hang on to, and so
that's a good idea. Should we pick one out for the group to do?
You're the leader. If you want to pick out a verse, that'd be great.
I'm the facilitator. That Shema was that Numbers 4 or something like that?
Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9 is the whole Shema.
Deuteronomy 6, 4. Okay. Yeah. I kept getting Numbers and Deuteronomy together because I did both this week. Deuteronomy 4. Yeah. 4 or 6.
Deuteronomy 6.
4 through 9. Okay.
4 through 9. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do that. Let's pick out Deuteronomy 6, 4 at least, and 4 through 9 if you can.
All right.
I got one quick question. Anybody familiar with this astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson? He's all over YouTube. Intelligent, very well spoken man. I watched a YouTube this morning about he's being interviewed, touching on God and religion aspects and astrophysics, and I want to study more about him. He's got a large platform. I think he's the director of some Hayden Planetarium in upstate New York or somewhere.
Right.
Cornell. He went to Cornell.
Right.
he was invited personally by Carl Sagan to come to Cornell, or had a letter from him, you know, welcoming, and really neat personal story. But I want to study more about him because I'm not quite sure how to take him, because he made a statement. He goes, he said, he's an educator. He said, basically said, I don't care what you believe, what you think, but keep creationism out of the classroom. You know, we're teaching science. We're not teaching creationism. He said,
Nick, I just say that's a dangerous statement.
Yeah.
I understand his point. He's not saying he doesn't believe in God. He's just saying, let us be scientists. And, you know, he got asked a myriad of questions. He's a very well speaker, but I want to see what more he has to say, because I believe Sagan was an atheist, was he?
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'll go back to Sir Isaac Newton and Copernicus. All the guys that were the fathers of science were all believers. And
Right.
I think science has gone a different direction.
Yeah.
What we call science today has gone a different
I think
direction.
his point was that, you know, the fundamental creationists believe in the young earth, and Jim and I touched on this, whereas, you know, his science is saying, no, you know, that's not his belief. But I want to read more and learn more about him. He's very easy to listen to, whether you agree with him or not. But his point was that I'm not forcing you to believe anything at all. You believe whatever you want to believe. That's what our free society is, and that's what freedom is. You go ahead and do it. I'm educating about science. I'm not going to educate you about your belief in creationism. So it was just, I don't want to get into a long discussion. It's just something I want to learn more about.
Yeah, we can't get into a long discussion because Tim's got to get on.
Yeah, I got to go mop the floor.
I'm going to
mop the floor.
I'm going to close the meeting. Okay. All right. Next week.
All right, everybody. Have a great day and stay safe. David Colbert, nice to see you, son.
See y'all.
See y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.